Hey, my beautiful souls. Welcome to the Spacious Sarah podcast. I am on a mission to bring back the lost art of meaningful conversations that touches our heart and expand our perspectives. My intention is to create a space where you feel seen, heard, and loved. Each episode is crafted to hold that space, allowing you to open up and explore thoughts and ideas in a safe environment. So, grab your imaginary marshmallows, find a cozy spot under the sky full of stars, and join me in these campfire-worthy conversations as I take you on a journey to places you've never been and spark conversations you've never had before. Let's go. Hi everyone, welcome to today's episode of the Spacious Sarah podcast. Today with me, I have Paul Gotel. Welcome, Paul. I'm so glad you're here today having this conversation with me.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me on the show. And I super appreciate the invitation. I always love to, it's always a win-win for me because I really see the world as a reflection system. And it's like in the manifestation of someone asking questions, then what happens is there's this, it's called embodied channeling. This is a term that I actually discovered very recently. It's what I've been doing for a good 20 years, but essentially it's not like I'm channeling from some other person or some other planet or some other system or whatever. There's, lots of different fanciful channels, but it's essentially when you remove your identity and your mind is used, your voice is used and all these things, but actually the expression coming through is not consciously understood before it's voiced. And so in your questions, every time I have a conversation, every time I appear in a podcast, every time I'm speaking on stage, I'm actually hearing information that Paul, as in the identity Paul, needs to hear. So it's always a win-win.
Nice. I'm excited to speak with you and learn more about what you do and how you make a difference in the world. So I'm going to start by asking this question, my favorite question. What brings you joy, Paul?
What brings me joy is very interesting because the context is that I use the word intrinsic motivation. So I think what that means is that in the action of you feel motivated, which means and the interpretation of that motivation by your identity, by your feeling body, so to speak, is this joyfulness. In other words, I think the secret is in the word full, like joyfulness. So the fact of the matter is that we are all like this spring. We were born as this like conduit. We're not like a container. We're actually, a lot of people sort of see us glass half empty, glass half full, trying to acquire stuff. But actually what I've realized is that we're a conduit, and source is actually the thing that's feeding all of us. Just like you might have a bunch of houses in a street, but they're all being fed off the same electrical grid that's feeding every house. And then in the house, all the different things plugged in. And so you have all this variety, you have all these different people, but essentially it's the same source coming through us. And when we get out of our way, we recognize and stop the blockages, which is what we do from an identifying factor. We kind of basically limit our expression, which I'll get into later. But essentially, when we don't do that, when we allow source to express through us, then we feel the fullness. And the feeling of that fullness is the joy. So it's the joy of fullness. So joyfulness is the joy of fullness. And you only feel full, which is really interesting, not when you fill up, but when actually you overflow. Because it's like we're a stream and you've got there's basically a choice. You either suppress yourself, you cap the screen, and then you're in stress, which is how most of us live, or you remove your identity, you remove the things, your pride and all these things out of the way, and you become a conduit. And when you allow that to come through, that's when you feel the joy of fullness as you share it. Because abundance isn't something you feel when you take, it's something you feel when you give, when you expend. That's when you actually feel the abundance that you are. And so in that context, we are all here to be like a conduit for source in its infinite variety through each of us to express that. And some of us express it through singing, some express it through dancing, some through speaking, some through any like most of entertainment in that context. It has this joyfulness to it. Why do people who have got lots of money and are past kind of like quite getting on in years still go out there and do it? Because it's in that moment. Why do I, I've been many things. I've been a DJ. I've been a singer on stage, and now I'm a speaker on stage. You've got all these people smiling and laughing and singing and going, wow, this is so great. And as I say, in the context of when you really lean into that, and in my case, the context of being a speaker or the context of being a DJ or singer on stage, I am, when you're in that joyful state, because it doesn't drain you. So when you're in the state of trying to have an agenda, which is you're in the state of trying to achieve something from it, like, oh, I want to change these people, or I want to fix, heal, whatever these people, or if you're in a state of, I want to get something from this, which is I want them to applaud me and tell me how great I am, then you get in, then you're stressed, and then you're like, oh, and that's why people are scared of going on stage and this sort of thing, because they have an agenda, and that agenda will pervert that expression. But when you just recognize that you are actually getting the payoff in the expression, and it really doesn't matter, you allow everybody that's witnessing or sharing the experience to have their own experience. Like, you don't have a criteria, then you get the fulfillment in the action of. And so this is the word joy is this unadulterated expression of self. And another word which sort of aligns with that is fun. So it's when you're having fun, you will feel joy. And fun, I have an acronym for that, which is fully unencumbered now. So it's when you are in this moment and you don't bring any baggage from the past, and you're not trying to have any agenda for the future. That's when you're having fun. You time slips into a place of right now. And we can see that in our children. We all know that from when we were tiny children. And it's something that we feel almost like as from an OS2 perspective, from a sort of normal way of thinking, it's almost frivolous. And so we reward ourselves with fun when we feel we've worked hard enough. So it's a very interesting thing. But there you go. So so right now, this is fun for me. Speaking on stage is fun for me. DJing is fun for me. Dancing is fun for me. Like creating, I'm just working on a film script. So these expressions of creativity where I am astounded at the capacity of source to come up with ideas beyond myself is what's amazing. And I think we all know that. We've all had moments where we have aha moments. So we drop our mental restriction, which, if you're trying to come up with an idea from your mind, it will always be, even if you had the biggest mind in existence, it would always be limited based on, it wouldn't have the capacity, the infinite capacity of source, which basically can have things arrive from behind you or from over here or whatever. In other words, unexpected ideas and inspirations. And so when you remove yourself from the pressure of having to come up with it, and you allow yourself to be a conduit, and you recognize when you're pushing, you're insisting, and you go, I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to go and have a dance, or I'm going to go and sit by a tree. And then suddenly, I'm going to go and chat to a friend about something else. And then suddenly you go, oh, that's it. And you become a receptacle for these ideas and these creative inspirations. And then the delight is when you get to share them with others. And so others become this opportunity for you to share the joy that you're feeling in the act of sharing. And that's really the purpose of it. The purpose of interaction is not to get something. The purpose of interaction is to share authentically who you are, and then see that reflected back at you in their eyes when they witness the unadulterated expression of source. That's my idea. Probably a lot of words around joy, but there's my idea about joy.
Thanks for sharing, because I think I've picked up a few stuff that you've mentioned. You mentioned about intrinsic motivation, right? And many times when we do something, and it comes from a place of very, very unconscious, when we do something, we kind of unconsciously expect something else in return. It can be as simple as a thank you or I'm sorry, right? And this
Yeah.
drives people nuts. They very unconsciously do not realize that they have attachment to the outcome, right? So what I'm hearing from you is, enjoy the process more, enjoy what you're doing, being in the present moment, because at the end of the day, the outcome, we can do the best that we can, but ultimately the outcome depends on someone else. Like, for example, if you say speaking on stage, if people don't clap and I get upset about it's an outcome because people are not clapping and I'm not so-called not getting the recognition that I deserve, right? So I really like the fact that you said it in a way that you just being present and enjoying the moment, just detaching completely out from the outcome. But
Yeah.
I want to ask you, how does one detach themselves? Like for people who have done the work, of course, it's easy for them to, do it much easier. I would say, I wouldn't say it's very easy, but much easier because they have. So how does one who's listening, how can they start detaching themselves from the outcome?
Gotcha. So, I'll just jump back a little bit to what you're saying there. Yeah. I mean, the premise of, I'll just explain a little bit. We talk about OS2, I talk about OS2 and OS3. And the context of that is like the humanity OS2, like an operating system. OS is an operating system and OS3 is an operating system. And then basically by studying humanity over the last, my whole life.
Is that an OS1?
Well, yes. So OS1 is yes. So OS1 would be, the essential needs, food, breathing, these kind of things. So a lot of animals are running on OS1, right? They're the instinct, and it's food, breathing, reproduction, these kind of things, right? Shelter, these kind of things, and we all will have them. Maslow talks about it in his hierarchy of needs. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs says these are the basic things, and if you don't have them, then and people, then there's the animalistic, and then there's the higher levels, which are the things like connection and spirituality and all these things, and he goes up in the thing. So in that context, to me, in this OS, there's the OS1, which is the animalistic survival reproduction context. OS2 is when you have that generally as a society. I mean, of course, there are all different levels of society and different souls choosing different expressions of wealth or providence, right? That's a whole different question, that I can get into that in depth. But essentially, but the premise is always coming from the context of this dynamic of making a decision. And most of us make a decision either based on basically reward and punishment. So OS2 is very much based on reward and punishment. You'll either do something you don't want to do to get something. So a lot of people do jobs to get paid that they go, I don't really like my job, I don't really like my boss, whatever. It's not what I thought I was going to do, etc., whatever those words might be. But essentially what they're saying is, I'm doing what, so why are you doing it? Oh, because I get this, right? So there's actions to get something that are inauthentic, or the other side is that actions that you would do something, but then you recognize there might be a loss. So in that context, when you're talking about other people, I might embarrass myself, I might hurt someone, I might lose a client, I might get a client, whatever it might be. And so you will adjust what authentically to a kid doesn't adjust its silliness, and everyone claps and giggles and thinks it's nice. And then a certain level, grow up, you're told to grow up, which means, okay, now you need to put on your dimmer switch and then adjust yourself and calm yourself down. And when you're really good at using your dimmer switch, then you can be called an adult. So these are like, and a dimmer switch basically is a resistor, which basically resists the expression of source, the light coming through, so it dims it. And this is what we all do to each other. I actually wrote a kid's book about this called The Little Light Is Shone Too Bright, because this is what happens to all of us. And so this is the premise of this. So the premise of OS3 in that sense is that you come from intrinsic motivation. In other words, you act where the fulfillment is in the action of. Because if you are fulfilled in the action of, there's no agenda to get something. So every person that seems to be outside of you, which ultimately is a reflection of you, that comes to you, that pulls an expression from you, when you choose to be authentic, that authentic expression is on a huge sort of like level is love. So authenticity expressed is love. Love is my definition of love is actually the absence of condition. So when you have a condition, then you have basically an agenda, and then that will adjust the authentic expression to either get something or not lose something. And so OS3 is you don't adjust that. You are always looking to see what is the authentic expression for you, and you express that, and you allow it to express through whatever way it wants to express. And that is the absence. When I say it, that's the energetic of that is the expression of love, because it has no conditions. In other words, you don't actually have an agenda for someone to hear you, someone to agree, whatever. And the interesting thing is that when you come from that place, what happens is the person listening, who is actually a reflection of yourself, it's like your Geiger counter as to actually whether you're doing it to get something. Because if you're doing it to get something, you have an insistence. And so even if you're doing a nice thing, but you want gratitude or you want appreciation or you want approval, what you're actually saying is, I'm going to do a trade. I'm going to do this behavior. I want you, we're not going to talk about it. We're not going to have an agreement that you're going to trade, but I'm going to have this secret requirement of you to appreciate me, to like me, to think I'm a good person, blah, blah, blah. And if you don't, I will feel slighted because you didn't meet your end of the bargain that I never even told you. And this is what we all do in all our interactions. And so the context of intrinsic motivation is that you make that, it's your own business. Am I being authentic? And authenticity in its own right is fulfillment in the action of. And as I say, if you are, you'll see it land. Now, even if that authenticity is what we call a home truth, which like you're a friend and you feel like, I really need to tell this person here, I'm not trying to quote unquote be nasty or whatever, and you say it with compassion, but ultimately it's pulled out of you in a loving way because you recognize that this is your friend needs to hear this. Now, your friend might challenge you in the context of being resistant or how could you say that to me and all the rest of it. If you are then offended, then you know that wasn't an act of love. That was an act of trying to fix them so that you could feel a better person or a good friend. But if you feel, look, I understand you're in pain and that pain's being reflected onto me, but I'm still here holding this, I'm holding a vision of you that's beyond this wound and this suffering that you're in, that I see you can't get out. But so that's the sort of internal talk. And you're like, no, I'm being guided to say this. And the challenge in that example would be, oh, I don't want to lose this friend, so I won't tell them the truth. I'll tell them what they want to hear. I'll go, that person's terrible. Yeah, get that person out of your life or leave that job or whatever, right? Whereas the real friend would be like, yeah, that must suck. I have compassion for that. But have you thought about what this is really telling you? You know, have you recognized that maybe you've been in that job a long time and you've been telling me you didn't really like it, and now, yes, your boss has done this terrible thing, or your coworker or whoever, right? But really, it's the universe pushing you out of a place that you've said you wanted to go, but you haven't had the courage to leave because you compromise, or I'm getting paid, or I feel safe. And so you continue to compromise in your life, in a relationship, in a job, or whatever. And so the universe then manifests a person that seems like a negative person or a demon person or an evil person or whatever you want to call it, whatever extreme. But really what they're doing is they're pushing your soul to move, to go forward in its evolution, because your identity, your small self, your ego has become so trapped in I call these the four evils, which sounds like a contradiction, but they're like security, safety, privacy, and protection. And so most of us, these are the main reasons why we will continue to be inauthentic and to betray ourselves, because we want to stay secure, safe, private, and protected. And those will come above being authentic. And so the thing is, if you're inauthentic and whatever you get from it, so yes, you will gain stuff. That stuff you gain fits who you're not, because you've been inauthentic to get it, because you want to make sure that you're secure, safe, private, and protected. And so that's the programming that's gone into the ego in the OS2. And so it's constantly adjusting every authentic expression or every idea you have with the, hang on, is that secure, safe, private, and protected? Are you going to lose something here? Could you gain something if you are a little dishonest with yourself? If you adjust yourself, would you? Okay, let's do that. And so it's always running that. And then whatever you get doesn't really land, because really it's an act of pollution, because what you've now added to yourself fits who you're not who you are, because you had to adjust who you are to get it. And anything, and you see, ultimately anything you lose. And so the universe is constantly trying to help you with this. And so it creates demons that are actually angels to take things from you that are holding you back, because you're so invested in keeping them that you're constantly betraying yourself. I'm not sure if you're following this. And so those demons are actually angels going, look, put that down. That's no longer serving you. And you're like, no, I worked really hard for it and I haven't had the payoff yet. So no. And so you struggle and you get stressed and you suffer. And that's, and basically the ultimate of that is your actual identity itself. You're like, I've worked really hard in building this identity and people respect me and I've achieved this and I've got these accolades and I've got these things on my wall that tell me I'm worthy of something. And so the idea of any of that being challenged, because the sad truth is, or the happy truth is that everything you added to yourself is less than what you came in with. I'll say that again. Everything you added to yourself is less than what you came in, because you added it because you blocked your expression. The expression of who and what you are is the highest expression of source through you, unadulterated. And so when you block it and you say, we all hear this word, right? We hear this word as a child, word too much. And so we put a cap on ourselves, and then we spend our life holding ourselves back. Like, right, we're constantly like this. And then we have a border control that says, oh, well, do it this way and you'll get this, or don't do it this way because you'll lose something. And so we're constantly in this place of suppression. And that's why we then go out into the world trying to get something. And every action becomes a trade. And even love becomes a trade. And the thing is, love, because love is actually the absence of condition, and a trade is the definition of condition. It's like, here's my conditions. I'm not saying there's anything wrong about it. I'm just saying that the secret trades that we run every day in all our conversations, that's what's wrong. They should be, like you go into a shop. I'm going to give you this money, and there's already, that says the price in it. Oh, the trade is I give you this money, I get this thing. So there's nothing wrong with trade, but when you are basically subconsciously doing it all the time without actually people agreeing, and especially in the realm of relationship and emotion, that's when it becomes a problem. And that's when we feel hurt and these kind of things. But we feel hurt by another because actually that other is representing the hurt we did to ourselves. In other words, the self-betrayal. So all of us are running this betrayal script on the basis of, as I said, these four evils: security, safety, privacy, and protection, which an identity needs. So my point is that we all believe we're an identity, but we're not actually an identity. We all know last week we were different. 1 year ago we were different. 5 years ago we were different. 10 years ago we were different. 20 years ago we were really different. And so on. And next week we'll be different. And then a year later we'll be different. So the idea that we're a continuity, like an identity that's like solid, is completely false. And when we look at it, this is what I was saying to you before, when you look at it, you go, yeah, you're right. I was different and then I will be different. So I use the word fluidity. So it's not, you're not a stable identity having these experiences. You're a fluidity. And the idea is that your expression, when you're authentic, you express out, and then the world reflects back who and what you are now. And then you are informed by that. You glean the wisdom of that. And then that gives you a new idea to then express out again. And so it's a constant feedback mechanism that constantly inspires you to bigger and greater and deeper things. And what it requires is for you to unpack your identity and drop the baggage of this identity that was built around the security, safety, privacy, and protection. And the reason I call it the four evils, because evil is actually live backwards. So L-I-V-E is live, evil is E-V-I-L. And it's so funny that most people don't know this. It's not like a common thing.
Yeah.
But so the point is, when I say evil, I'm saying it's when you are living backwards, when you are living, so E-V-I-L is basically when your operating system is at odds with its purpose. So your purpose as a separate human vessel is actually to be a conduit for source from a particular perspective that then has a unique feedback mechanism that helps it evolve. And then that wisdom gets fed back to the all that is, source, God, creator, whatever you want to call it. And that, what I call it, is infinite potentiality. So the source, God, whatever, is basically everything potential, nothing actual. So everything actual seems to be separate, seems to be all these different things in the world, but actually are like finite potential, finite actuality. So they arise, they have a life cycle, and then they basically go back to the infinite potentiality. They go back to source. And then when they go back to source, all the wisdom of the experience of that life cycle is fed to source and then sparks like new like aspirations, because we have eternity and an infinite amount of experience to explore. So it never gets boring and never repeats. But what we have to understand is that we built all of our system around what's, what I call, basically we decided the good and bad, so essentially we decided there was this thing called good and bad, right and wrong. And we call it morals, and they're all different around the world. But essentially what we realized is that this concept of good and bad is like good gain, bad loss. So we said if we lose something, it's bad, and the biggest bad would be your life, right? But also your identity, anything you invested in. And if we gain something, it's good. But actually, as I said, because you then adjust your authenticity, everything you gain is actually an act of pollution, and everything you lose, which the universe shows up at having people do bad things to you to take things from you, is actually an act of purification, because you couldn't lose what you are. You could only lose what you've adopted that's now limiting your expression. And so that changes the whole game. So now it's good loss, bad gain. So every day I wake up and go, what am I not seeing that's limiting me that I can let go of today? Ease, because your body is now having to store energy. It's just like batteries and things like that. We have in electricity, like we have trip switches. Our body has trip switches, which is like, okay, now you're going to have an illness. Now I'm going to put you in bed. Now I'm going to break your foot. Now whatever it is. And you're going to get, because we need to deal with this suppressed energy. And so this is why we have illness, because we're all running this context, right? So when you're insistence, you'll create resistance. And then the other side of that, which is basically just the opposite. So when you're in resistance, when somebody's trying to tell you something, or you're feeling forced to do something, or you're feeling like you don't have a choice, or your own internal mind's going, I have to do this, I should do this. Why am I not doing this? I'm not good enough, blah, 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 whatever, right? Then you get in resistance, and then you will create insistence. So when you're trying to make somebody wrong and you don't want, then you'll feel this insistence happening. So when you're in resistance, you lean in. So in other words, resistance is the privacy protection, security, safety, privacy protection. In other words, you're resisting because you feel your privacy or your protection or your safety or security is being threatened. And so you resist. You're like, I'm being unsafe. And so essentially that's when you lean in. So you lean in because essentially truth, in other words, your authentic truth, which only you know that moment, because you're the one who's feeling this, right? Am I in insistence? Okay, I'll lean back. Oh, I'm in resistance. I lean in. So you're constantly, every moment, checking in on that. It's like having a boat. When you're sailing a boat and you're working with your sails, you're working with the wind, you're working with the tides, you're working with the waves, you're working with all these different elements that are affecting how the boat goes. So you can't just sort of hold it and expect to keep going. All these micro adjustments. So you constantly, if you'll see a boat captain, someone, if they're helming, they're constantly adjusting. All these micro adjustings. Oh, lean in. Oh, there's a bit of insistence there. Let's create resistance. Oh, okay. And so you're constantly trying to adjust so that you're just smoothly sailing with as least resistance as you can. And so that's how you start to develop this. So when you're in insistence, you lean back, and when you're in resistance, you lean in. Because in resistance is like you're not wanting to lose something, and anything you lose will actually purify you. In other words, it will make it clearer and authentic. And even if that's a person or a job or something, if that moves out of the way, it's because it required you to be something that you weren't in order for it to stay. And that's why then we want something from our partner. Then we want something from our job. And that's when we say, I gave the best years of my life to that person, or I'm not valued. You're not valued because you're not valuing yourself. You're not making the decision, which is, what's authentic for me is of value, and I'm going to make choices for that. You say, well, I will not make choices for that, but in return, I want you to value me for the fact I'm making this sacrifice for you. And then we have this whole religious context around what a good thing it is to sacrifice. Service doesn't require sacrifice. Service is the highest form of bliss because it's getting out of the way and expressing but it doesn't require result, right? So when people come from service, but they want to fix the world or they want to change somebody, then now it's just you're using service as a device to make yourself feel of value. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
And ultimately, truth requires risk. So if you want to know in each moment which decision, every moment there's a decision, and normally we'll go, okay, here's authenticity. Hang on, are we going to lose something? Okay, stop that. Or are we going to get something? Okay, adjust it and go that way. So this is how we subconsciously work pretty much every moment. But the truth requires risk. What does that mean? The truth isn't actually at risk. It's just like your essence is never at risk. Your identity is at risk. Your identity is what needs the privacy and protection and safety. The truth of you doesn't need that. The truth of you knows that whatever's lost is purified by that experience. And so the truth that requires risk means that what's at risk is actually the lies about you. In other words, the limiting identifying factors that you've taken on about yourself, and then the world supports. Oh, I'm short. Oh, I have a problem with my genes. My weight is this, or there's the physical dynamics, right? That, or no, well, yeah, my mum, my family's not very intelligent. I'm terrible with numbers. All these negative programmings that we just constantly carry, and so the universe will basically create situations where we have to take risk, where we're fearful, because the truth will require risk. So any moment, if you make the safe choice, you're making this choice to try and retain the identity that is limiting you, because the true choice will always ask you to risk what? Risk a lie about you, because the truth itself isn't at risk. What's always at risk. So whenever someone thinks something's at risk, it's the lie about them that the universe is trying to create an experience for you to drop that lie about you. And you might have to go through some crazy hardships. It's like myself, I've gone through what's called life death. So I've actually died twice, had 2 near-death experiences through having E. coli. But by going into that place, I was able to be a presence, witnessing an identity. And then this is where I got a lot of this understanding that it's the identity, this construct of all these beliefs I had about myself. That was what the problem was. And that's why I kept, and the value I gave to that was why I kept being inauthentic and making decisions. And that would play out as having a problem in my marriage, or a problem in my children, or a problem in my business. And it got to the point where I basically wanted to die. I said to God, take me now. I can't believe my life is in this place. I know better and I'm in this place. Next thing I know, 10 days later, I'm in hospital and on life support. And it's like, and in that place, I was able to have this gift where I died, and I was able to witness, the problem is my investment in my identity. That's actually the thing that's holding me back. That's the thing that I'm having conflict and is playing out with other people. What if I go back and no longer give that value? What if I go back and attempt to live as a fluidity? And then I came back, and then basically the minute I got that, the doctors revived me. They're like, we've got him back, and within a day, they're like, well, you can go home. You're fine. We don't know why, and we need the bed, so you can go. And then I proceeded over the next 10 years to have financial death, where I lost all my money, emotional death, where I had the divorce, the love of my life and the family and thing all split, the emotional. I had the legal death, where I was I was accused of something by the government. I was threatened with jail, and I had to fight all these things. I had a social death where I was accused in that way, and I was ostracized. So each of these things, and what's interesting is that each of these things for me, and to bring me to this understanding, were unjust. So there was this, so we all have this dynamic of this is unjust, this is not fair, this person or this situation is unfair. And so what I had to realize was, well, to make sense of this, there has to be an understanding. So from an OS2 perspective, it's unfair and this isn't right. But from an OS3 perspective, this is perfect. and this is serving me. So then I had to, look at each of those experiences and understand that somehow, after going through the suffering, because each of those was a traumatic, at least a year and a half long suffering experience, right? Very painful, emotionally, in some cases physically. And then I would come through it and I'd go, oh, I have lost that part of myself. That part of myself is no longer there. And yet I am still here. And actually I feel lighter. Like there's an so enlightenment is when you are carrying less and less and less into each moment, which I said earlier, fun is fully unencumbered now. So your life becomes fun when you no longer carrying this self-importance of an identity, this pride of an identity that you've worked so hard to build up. When you carry that into every moment and you carry in this expectancy that other people should see it and value you and have that worth. But really, it's because you know that you have your own story about yourself, which is that you don't have worth. That's why you constantly betray yourself and do things to gain stuff and do things to not lose stuff and are constantly sabotaging your authenticity, which is saying to yourself, oh, what I truly feel and think, that's not worth it. That, I'm sorry, I'm going to override that. And so because you're constantly doing it, of course, you see that out there in the world and people question you. You go, but I'm a good person. I'm doing good things. But you're doing it from this place of trying to acquire, which is one of the insidious things. Most of us do a more self-betrayal trying to be a good person than actually being a bad person. And so, this is how it all plays out. So I don't know if that answered a bunch of questions there, but I think I did.
It did. Actually, the interesting thing is that, so we were supposed to have this call, I think some time ago, right? And I think probably about 2 months or more, because I kind of remember posting it in the groups. And I feel like everything that happens kind of comes at the right space and time. And I feel having this conversation at today, this point of time, I think it served a purpose. So what happened last week was, for some reason, I have no idea why, I was just feeling so out of alignment. The smallest thing would trigger me. And I just went into a mental breakdown to a point where something my mom said, something my sister said, it just triggered me like that, which will not just in a normal state of mind, I would not be triggered. And then I ended up sitting in the car and I was just crying and weeping. I'm like, God, come on, what are you trying to tell me? Right? And throughout my life, I realized that every time I resist something, when I want something and I resist, manifestation doesn't happen. And every single time I've manifested stuff in my life, it just comes so easily and it flows to me. And now speaking with you, you sharing all this, it's not something that I'm unaware of. I do know, but the fact that the way you explained it, I just felt like in the last half an hour or so, I'm talking to like the modern version of a monk or Eckhart Tolle or Bob Proctor, So yes, that was really interesting. I found what you said, and about the identity part, it's so true. Up to last year, I've always attached myself to some sort of identity which I wasn't aware of. And last year, it was my worst rock bottom ever. My relationship ended 13 years later. 2 months after that, my dad passed away. I was totally crushed, but everything had to happen so that I could attend MVU last year. And that completely changed my life, like completely. The way I think, the way I feel. And then I realized you can strip away everything that I have, all this material stuff, everything that you have, you can strip away all that. But what you can't strip away is my experiences and the knowledge and the awareness that I have, which is so profound, and I can just rebuild myself again. So, yeah, so thanks for sharing.
Yeah, you're most welcome. And I mean, I'll leave you with sort of a little anecdote that responds to what you're talking about. It's like life forces us to move. So an analogy in life. So for instance, sometimes you're living in a house and in that house you have cupboards and, garages and basements and attics, and they're full of stuff. And you don't normally see most of this stuff. It's around, you're aware if you need to find something, you go, oh, it's in the house somewhere. But essentially, there's a lot of stuff that's no longer serving you that you might not have actually worn or used for years and years, like literally, and you carry it from one place to another. But but then life will come up with a reason. Maybe you'll lose a job, or the landlord will be selling their house, whatever, and you have to move. And or in extreme cases, acts of God, and suddenly you have to literally move. This is it within this metaphor, you actually have to move. And so what you do is you start going through stuff and you recognize, actually, if I have to take this now, especially if you have to pay for removal, you're like, okay, I'm going to take half of it down to the Goodwill. I'm going to give half of it to my friends. I'm going to, and you start recognizing that you have been carrying and retaining a bunch of stuff that really no longer serves you. Because, ultimately what I am is a philosopher. And in other words, I'm looking, which ultimately philosopher is like the study of truth. It's like I'm looking what is intrinsically the underlying, I use the word operating system of life, of existence. And I recognize that what we think is the current operating system is actually just an operating system from a limited perspective. So if you're only looking from here, like a bit like the whole Indian proverb with the elephant and the big ears and the tail and the different blind beggars looking at it and describing it very differently. So if you're only looking at it from one perspective, it's no wonder that we've come up with the understanding that we have around life, and this idea that good gain, bad loss, and all these dynamics. It makes sense why we do it. But when you actually, see the whole big picture, which obviously for me was a case of actually dying and being able to get out of that existence, was like, oh, hang on. That's such a limited perspective. All of us has a limited perspective through choice, and it serves the whole, but it's not true. So the identity restriction is an untruth that we're all like addicted to, so to speak, and invested in. And so when you recognize that and you're able to do that, then you can come from this other place. And ultimately, all suffering is what I, if you were here, I'd say, put your hand like this, and I'd try and pull your fingers, and you go, ow. And then and eventually you do that. And I say, okay, all suffering is you're trying to grasp. So whether you're trying to get something or you're trying to hold on to something, that's suffering. And ultimately, the biggest suffering is that where you feel your identity is threatened. So when you say I'm really hurt, you mean my identity, the thing I've invested in, I feel it being threatened. I feel it being questioned. That's why you're hurt. And you're hurt because you've invested your authenticity. In other words, you betrayed yourself for it, and the payoff hasn't happened yet. And ultimately, what I teach is self-revolution. And people say, what's self-revolution? I say, when you find yourself revolting. And, people kind of laugh and go, hang on, did he just insult me? Hang on. I say, when you look in the mirror and you find yourself revolting, which is two meanings. One, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. I don't know why, but things are just not working. Things are falling apart, and I've had enough. Something's got to change. And you recognize that something that's got to change is yourself, because you actually look and you recognize that the payoff was not worth, the cost was not worth the payoff. So what it cost you was this constant sabotage and inauthenticity, and the payoff never actually pays off. You think it is, you start on this journey thinking it's going to pay off, but eventually you get to a certain point in life, you go, it wasn't fucking worth it. That's it. I'm done. I'm going to be authentic. Whatever my life looks like, I have to be true to me, because this betraying myself hasn't worked. Maybe I've got the money, maybe I've got the fame, but we have all seen people who have got fame, money, power, success, and they are very unhappy. They're addicted, etc., etc. I'm not saying that's everybody, but if your intention is that those things are going to give you the happiness, that happiness is it's like a hit. It's like an addictive hit. And the minute you get it, you want more. Okay, that zero is enough. I need more zeros. So that car's not big enough. I need a bigger car. I've only got one house. I need 3 houses. You're constantly looking, because, we have this thing called relativity, which is, oh, now I've got used to this car for a year. No big deal. To others, it might be, wow, you've got a BMW. Wow. You go, yeah, well, it's just my car. Now you're like, oh, I want a Maserati SUV or whatever it is. I'm just making things up. But you understand, because now you want the relative hit. You always want to feel like you're getting more so that you can feel the equal payoff. And eventually, that starts to topple. And so essentially in that sense, but ease is that you stop, what could be easier than never grasping for something and never holding on to something. And so the principle, which is like Advaita Vedanta, which is, the deep teachings of India, the Vedic teachings, is that what comes, let come, what stays, let stay, what goes, let go. You don't interfere with that process. You listen, you lean in when you're in resistance, you lean back when you're in insistence. So you follow that motivation, that expression, that excitement, but you never actually are attached to this or something better. Better meaning this or the thing this changes into to serve me better. Because when you move into a journey, the first thing that will happen in any journey is you'll get a hurdle. And most people these days, especially, there's a spiritual bypass, which is, oh, I was going to do this, but it wasn't meant to be. As if there's a context that God's up there. Oh, I have a plan for you, and you're not going to it, so we're going to put things in your way to make you go somewhere else. So God is like in this context. I mean, ultimately, I think source is infinite potentiality, right? So it's this unlimited energetic potentiality. It is nothing, so it can be everything. Because if it's anything, it limits the possibility of it being everything. So if God is everything, it has to be nothing for it to potentially be everything. I don't know if you follow that logic, but so when people talk about define God as a gender or whatever, then obviously they're just projecting their idea and taking like around it based on their self-projection. But actually, that's not what it is. But in the context of a story, if God was a personality, then in that context, the personality, just like a parent. I don't know. Do you have kids?
No, not married.
No. So all parents know this. When your kids are small and they're playing, you don't care whether they're drawing, playing with Lego, playing with plasticine, whatever it is. If they're happy, you're like, oh, look, they're happy playing. And if they change their mind and want to play with that, they're playing with that now. This is kind of the relationship of let's say, the grand, or what I call the big U. It's like, wow, look, they're exploring there, Because ultimately, the purpose of our experience is joyful entertainment. That's what we're doing. And that entertainment creates exploration, which creates, like, let's say, in those exploration, we have experiences. And in those experiences, we reveal wisdom. Like we start to know something through the experience of it, not through the factuality of it. And then that wisdom is fed back. So when we discorporate as an identity, that's fed back to the infinite potentiality, which then feeds the next expression. And this goes on for eternity. And it's always expanding and always. So every one of us is feeding our experiences, are serving the all that is to then bring about the next expression. And so some of us might be entertained by horror movies. Some of us might be entertained by romantic movies, some tragedies, etc. And so when you look at it in the person you said they need fixing, on one level, in the level of separation, which isn't actually true, but let's say it is for the moment, they are perfectly where they are, having the experience they perfectly need. If they ask you and then you feel resistance, then lean in and share. The minute you feel insistence, like you suddenly they're not paying attention, you stop. This is how I work. Sometimes I lose people that I'm talking and they just and they glaze over. I just stop. And they go, oh, sorry. Yeah, can you talk about, or they'll go, yeah. I go, oh, it's no worries. Because it's like everything I'm saying ultimately is for me to hear. So this whole conversation of expression to you is a galvanization and a refinement of that which is coming for me, that then serves this vessel called Paul, this English bloke with his accent, to give me more understanding. And in that more understanding, it opens up it takes away, let's say, your identity is like the sides of the river. It keeps the river small. And so the more your identity is worn away, the wider the banks, the more that can come through you, then the more joy you can have in that expression. And so that's kind of what's going on. And so ultimately, life is easy. The ease is you have an open hand approach. You allow things to arrive. Maybe they arrive and they stay there forever. But you don't ever keep them there. It's like the nightingale, that whole, the Emperor and the Nightingale, and he cages the nightingale and it stops singing. and then he freezes it, and then it comes back and it sings. And so it's like this. So some people or things in your life are nightingales. They come and they sing and they go, and you just, when they're there, you celebrate and appreciate them. When they go, you understand that the space is being made as an invitation for something else to arrive. So every time you lose something, you go, wow, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? What new thing, what upgrade is going to, even when you lose something about yourself, oh, wow, I lost this job. I lost this relationship. Wow, it's really defined by that. Wow, without that definition, what can I look at? And just like the house moving thing, you're like, oh, now because I have to change, you'll never rebuild yourself the same way, because you've learned in the first build or in the first living of your experience things. Now, if you stay in all the same container, you can't apply those. But when you change a job and everything, or change a relationship, or change, you allow a personality to shift, then what happens is you go, oh, now I thought I wanted to rebuild this the same way. Like say your house burnt down and you wanted to build exactly the same house as your dream house. But as you're building, you go, you know what, actually, now that I have the opportunity to rebuild, I'm going to add this, or I'm going to change that, or I don't really need that anymore. And so you can do that with yourself. And the idea of meditation every day is that before you plug in your identity, before you plug in your ego, before you boot up your personality, oh, need my coffee, I haven't woken up yet, you sit and you allow. So at night, you meditate to allow whatever needs to be dropped. You go, wow, there's a challenge today. I felt, oh, why is that challenge? So just like that hurdle thing, when I was saying, the one meant to be, when you have any goal or any motivation to do something in life, you're moving towards it, is for you to have momentum. And then you hit, a challenge. And this is like a hurdle. Now, I say a hurdle because if you're carrying baggage, which is an identifying factor or an attachment to a person or a job or something, or this is who I am, then that's like a bag. And you can't jump a hurdle carrying baggage. You actually have to, and each hurdle might be an illness, it might be a financial challenge, it might be a relationship or a family challenge or a job challenge. The way it shows up is directly the way that your baggage that you're carrying. So it will tell you, the hurdle will inform what you need to put down. And so you go, oh, that hurdle, what do I believe about myself that if I chose to put that belief down, this wouldn't be a hurdle. So, oh, well, it's money. Well, if I chose to believe that I'm always provided for and I can go ahead and move towards this thing, even if I don't ever have the money to pay for it, maybe somebody provides it. Maybe I volunteer. Maybe the money just shows up from nowhere. Maybe I don't need money for it. Maybe someone just gives me it. Who knows, right? In other words, you move out of this is the way it has to be so that I can feel value because I figured it out, to it could happen in 1,000 different ways that I have no clue. I'm going to move ahead. I'm going to put down that hurdle. I'm going to put down that baggage. And then you get to jump that hurdle. And then you move on a bit more. And then another hurdle shows up. Oh, now I'm feeling sick. Oh, well, okay, what does that, oh, for men and for women, but for men, for a lot, it's like, oh shit, if they've got physical injury, they don't feel like they have worth. They can't do physical things. A lot of men define themselves, and a lot, in society, can you help me carry this? If you're injured, you can't do any of that. And I feel useless. I can't wait till I get better. And so there's this resistance, as opposed to, oh, what other attributes can I have? Well, maybe I can't carry it, but maybe I can support the team because I have experience in how to do something. I don't have to be the physical part of it. I can bring some other thing, or maybe I can be the compassionate support, whatever it is, right? You then discover something else in that limitation in one area, then something else gets to blossom within you that you didn't see. And so eventually, as you go through this journey, the you that started, that thought it needed this journey to achieve this goal, money, fame, power, success, whatever, you actually, the whole point of that is just a ruse to make you go on this journey, to create momentums and motivation to keep going. And you, through the journey, you literally will come up against all these challenges. That is to basically have you drop a lie about yourself. And so this context that, oh, well, I want to find somebody who's just going to be easy, or I want to find a job that's going to be easy, is a false identity, because ease is actually when you finally stop doing this and you do this. And you just trust that. You trust that flow, because it is always whatever's flowing out and discorporating. And so you recognize that entropy, which is the force that takes apart, is actually the force that takes, when something is taken apart, it is going back to source. It's going back to God. When we fall asleep at night and our consciousness dissolves, we go back to oneness with source. That's why we are refreshed. And if we don't get REM sleep, we don't get proper sleep. Why do people get so destroyed by sleep? It's like you can fast longer than you can go without sleep. It's like, you need to breathe, one, then you need to drink, but then you need to sleep. Eating is after sleep. And why? Because every night when we dissolve our consciousness, we dissolve back to source, and then we are rebuilt. But then our ego takes the identity and it boots us up to restriction. So the idea of meditation in the morning is that you look to see that and you go, you know what? And you open up to the idea that today you might drop that part of you. You might let that go. That if that thing that you've been working so hard is not happening, okay, let's make space for something else to come in. And so every day for me now it's good loss, bad gain, in the context of if I feel myself insisting, trying to get something, I realize that I've just betrayed myself for it. And if I lose something, I realize I've just purified myself. It's like, oh, now I've made space for myself to be more authentic and come through from a place. And in that context, it's a much easier way of living. The 4 E's, security, safety, privacy, and protection. If you really live that, it's so much easier, because you recognize, wow, I worrying about those things. It's like, oh, I want to travel there. Oh, but what about, is it safe? Oh, what about that? Oh, I want to go on that line, or I want to do it. Oh, like my mum will not buy on a line. Never has. She's 86, because she's scared because her old husband. Oh no, they'll get into your accounts and they take all your money. So she will not do anything online. Yeah, and I'm like, which is fine. She said that's fine. And I'm not judging, but I'm just saying it's like this is the context. Our limiting beliefs that we create our personality on. I believe we die. All humans die in that context when we are no longer serving the soul that is inhabiting us. So we are an animated physical skin suit by a spirit, a soul, and then an electric impulse, whatever you want to call it. And the context of that is that when we are serving that, so in other words, when we are not suppressing ourselves, but we are being authentic, then we could potentially live for hundreds of years. But when we are constantly suppressing ourselves and creating this resistance and exhausting ourselves, because basically we're fighting against ourselves and we're fighting against this unlimited supply. So of course we eventually exhaust ourselves. And most people in their old age, like, I'm exhausted with life, because they've spent their life fighting against the being this conduit for source. It's like that, and that's the most joyful thing. That the being that in service of that expression is what joy is. And so obviously that's why. And so when we no longer serve the expansion of our soul, we die, and that could happen. And it can be like, in other words, but the context is that what dies is the identity that's limiting the expression, not the actual presence. The presence cannot die. Because it never was born, and it will never die. It simply transmutes into different expressions. Right? Which we call identities, which we call individuals. And so there's no actual real death. There's just simply transition into another expression. And that expression is no longer limited by the previous identifying factor. And so the point of living as a fluidity, which is my new book's going to be called Fluidity, the Art of Deconstruction, which is basically taking a lot of what you just said as the masterclass and putting that into a premise so that it's clear, right? And answering a lot of the questions like, hang on, but what about this? And hang on, what about that? Because we're so programmed from OS2 that we have this, but hang on, no, but in reality, right? So, and it's like, so it's basically, a lot of it's going to be, and which is a lot of what my blog is about. It's like each day in my blog, it's like, this is how we all deal with it. This is why that way of dealing with it doesn't work. So it might come across as something called, like jealousy. And then we say, we normally deal with it this way. And then this is why it doesn't work. And then this is the OS3 way of dealing with what is that energy and why is it occurring and how is it serving you? And so basically taking all of those. And my blog every day is basically what's going on for me. So Paul goes through all of these experiences. And yet when I apply myself, in other words, when I sit to create a video or whatever, which I do, I literally just pick up my phone and talk. I don't prepare it. I don't script it. I'm just like, boom. The what I call the big you, as opposed to the small you, is supposed to contain the identity, talks through me to me into a screen on there. And then I just share that. But essentially that's the premise. Here's how we're doing it. Here's why we all feel pain and suffering and irritation and frustration. And here's the actual reason why it happens, what it really is, how it's serving you, and the way to know and the way to utilize that. So this is like, say, the porting system of this sort of this broken system that we're currently using, because it's a limited perspective into this. And that's my, let's say, that's what I'm speaking about, but it's also my idea of how I'm putting that together into a sort of format, whether it, be an online format and another book, etc., around this context.
I like when you kept mentioning about the resistance part, right? A few days ago. So right now I'm in the midst of creating my course, which I've been putting off for so long because, there was just so much of resistance. So two things I learned. A few days ago, I saw a post on Instagram, I think by Michael Clark, and he says that whenever you are trying to step out of your comfort zone and you're resisting, something along the line of, telling yourself that it's not that you're incapable, it's just that you're doing something that you have never done before. It's your first time doing it. And that's why you're resisting. It's not that because you're incapable. So I started telling myself, each time I want to sit down and write those contents, I'm like, no, it's just uncomfortable because you've never done it, Sarah. So just go ahead and do it. It's not that you don't know about this. And now that you shared about when you're resisting, go forward, I think it will help me.
Lean in.
Yeah. So
I mean, well, what's actually happening is that on one level, there's an identity that's saying, oh, if I put this out, what will the reaction be? Will I be approved of, or will I be disapproved of? I really don't want to be disapproved of, because that will make me feel less. And I'm doing this to feel more. So you have an agenda that putting this course out will create approval, success. People will like it. It will help people. And therefore you, whether you're aware of this or not, will then feel that you are more successful, a good person, doing your purpose, whatever the terminology is. And so there is an agenda. And love is the absence of conditions. So what you need to do is recognize that the fear is about the identity that is worried about, it's want to keep itself secure, safe, privacy, and protected. So doing something new is putting it at risk. But as you said, truth requires risk, because in the action of, when you do that, what actually happens is that which you are trying to protect will die in the attempt. So, but that's a good thing. See, we think it's a bad thing, and that's why we're scared, but it's a good thing. This experience of putting yourself out there, sharing a course, speaking online, speaking on stage, will have everything about yourself that your life is built on the false identity of yourself will be at risk and will probably come apart. And from other people's perspective and from your perspective halfway through the journey, it will seem like a bad thing. But it's actually an act of liberation. It's an act of revolution that will free you. And so if you are informed that that's what's going on, then you can catch yourself in those moments. You can still allow yourself to have the feelings of those feelings, but you can understand, oh, this isn't something of me dying. This is, in that context, this is a lie about me I'm being liberated from, that is holding me back, that served me, because everything that we adopted served us when we adopted it. But now it's restricting us, right? Just like, training wheels on a bike. There's a point where you have to take them off so the kid can actually ride. Same with us. Everything we've taken on in life, I actually wrote a children's book called The Fabulous Snowshoes, which basically illustrates this, which is that everything you take serves that experience right now. But when you want to do something new, it hinders that expression. And so it has to die. It has to be decorporated. Entropy has to take it apart, deconstruct it, so that energy is then available for you to create something new that now serves you where you want to go. So you're feeling, I feel like I want to do this, I want to do this. But your old identity is like, well, why am I doing this? Well, you're doing it to get money. You're doing it to get success. You're doing it to get these things. Oh, but what if I don't get that? What if I lose those things? Oh dear, well, let's just get. Whereas if you do it from a place of, no, I want to I want to basically be motivated by the intrinsic expression of who and what I am, then it comes without condition. You literally, if nobody ever signed up and nobody ever read it, it wouldn't bother you. If it would bother you, that bothering will adjust how you are doing it to actually arrive at getting it to get a result. And the thing is, what you're doing is actually not being motivated at its core from the results. It's being motivated at its core from the expression, from you discovering your brilliance in the expression, in allowing yourself to take the risk, to allow yourself to risk and celebrate the identity that will be deconstructed in this experience. And so it's repositioning your mindset around this whole journey that you will not survive in a good way. So you understand. So it's not about I'm doing something to fix other people. It's I'm doing something to take apart that which is holding me back within myself. And I feel very like there's something inside of me that's inspired to do this. So I'm going to lean in and celebrate everything that gets shaken off in the friction of going forward. And I understand that every baggage I drop will make my journey lighter. It's like some people go on a hike and they put loads of stuff in their backpack and everything, they're carrying stuff. And other people just go, no, I'm going to drink a lot right now. And I'm just going to take a little like apple in my pocket. And because I like to hike, I don't like to feel that, it's like, it's that sense of not necessary and trusting that what you need will be provided. And that's ultimately the thing, is that the old system doesn't trust. The old system doesn't understand that providence is the inherent nature of source. It's unexhaustible. There's no way you could use it up. There is no limitation. All of us decided that there was limitation by the idea that there was a limitation of life. In other words, that we could die. And so therefore we decided there was need. And how could I get more life? How can I get more out of the amount of life I've got? But we're an eternal being. There is no limitation. This whole thing is a confused ideology. And so we apply it to everything. But when you recognize that you are provided for and that everything that you lose is making space for something that is upgraded, meaning something that now serves you better than previous. It's not that it's a better thing than that. It's that it's more aligned with who you are. And every identifying factor about yourself that you lose is actually now you're letting that go because it's restrictive, and you constantly want to be expansive. Like I was saying about the river losing as the river gets more like as what comes through you is more energetic. It takes out more of the riverbanks, and the riverbanks gets wider, and there's less and less of you to get in the way. But the meaning your identity, but there's more of the experience of the bliss of being surrendered. And Michael Beckwith says, it's like there's 4 stages, which is to me, things are happening to me, the victim; by me, the manifester, which is where most modern spiritual people are at, like I'm going to make this happen, I'm going to manifest. Then through me, and this is what I'm talking about, where the river, and then ultimately as me, which is a very rare state, but can be achieved by everybody, and is achieved, where there literally is there's no separation between you and the source that's coming through. You recognize that this is one and the same, and that's my experience most of the time in this interview or when I'm on stage. I didn't plan for this. I was actually doing something completely very, very. I was fixing something, and I was talking to a new tenant, and I went, "Oh, Colin, I've got to get on a podcast." And I sit down, I take a moment, take a few breaths, and my only prep is get out of your way. That's my only prep, right? And so that's what I would suggest: get out of your way. The you that you're trying to protect by delaying and resisting is the thing that this experience is going to deconstruct. So face the fact that you're doing this not for the exterior wealth, but for the interior journey of losing that which is holding you back. And so it's serving you. So every moment that you come across something that feels like, threatening, or like, it's like then irritating, whatever, then see which part of you can drop, and then take that next step and take that next step. And eventually you will lose that version of you, that identity that is in any way scared, in any way feels aversion to risk, and then you will start to delight and become a channel for this, your own unique flavor and expression that source wants to bring to the world through you, and can do it through nobody else.
Is there a catchphrase that one can use when they catch themselves being in that state, like resisting something, or they just want to do something? Like, for example, like for me, right? If I find myself resisting or procrastinating, right? Is there a catchphrase I can just catch that demon out and, just pull through?
Yeah, exactly. You just, like, as I said, when you're in resistance, you lean in. When you're in insistence, you lean back. That's it. And if you're not in either of those, because you're at peace. And when you recognize you're at peace, then that peace is the understanding of trust, and the landing of trust, the landing that wow, I'm at peace. That means I trust the process. Wow, I'm in trust. Wow, now you can get out of your way and you can feel the joy that we were to start this whole conversation with.
Thanks for sharing. So is there an OS4?
Honestly, I think the context of this is not it. Like, in that context, could there be like intellectually? Yes, I'm sure there could be intellectually. I mean, like I talk about, like the to me, by me, through me, as me, right? And so my first book is called The Beat You and the Guide of Self-Revolution, right? And so there's, in that series, there's going to, the next book be The Wow of You. And so that is the manifester, the part of you that starts becoming a sorcerer and it's like, wow, I can make all these things happen. And then the next book is The Now of You. And then that's when, like Eckhart Tolle or whatever, then you become this channel, this vessel. And so in that context, the OS4, I suppose, would be the as you, is where there is no you to interrupt. I would say at that point, it's less, it's more of the experience that eventually you winked, like you have these moments of that winking into your life where you dissolve. And so it's less of an operating system at that point. I mean, what I realized is that I thought OS2 was like, oh, this is a faulty operating system. It doesn't work. We all know it doesn't work. Okay, what's the upgrade? And how do I port people? But now what I realize is that OS3 is actually, what I call OS3, is actually the only operating system that was always running. So everything I've shared with you, I share things that I believe apply to anybody who has existed as a consciousness. So it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter when, the future, the past, male, female, young, old, sick, healthy. So it's like, I'm only interested in what looks like to be an applicable understanding to existence, if that makes sense. Yeah. Now, of course, everyone could debate that and have different theories and blah, blah, blah. But essentially, what I presented to you, if you listen back, I think you'll find it applies to anybody who's ever existed.
Yeah.
And so in that context, I call it the OS3 because we're talking about this porting system, this step from 1 to 2 to 3. But really, it's the system that it is the operating system that's always been running, because it's very pure in the sense of that it's very simple. It's stripping. Now you can make it as complex as you like. It's like you can cut up, it's like with a computer, so that by adding more and more like cuts to something, you create more surface area. And so that's why our brains are so intense, because they have so much surface area. And if you took them out, they, fill a football field, because they have all those little crevices and everything like that. So by creating it, so in the smaller space, you can create, so with our computers and our phones and everything, we're creating more and more capacity within a smaller space, right? And so in that context, you are discovering that you can get intensity and an unlimited amount. We have eternity to explore infinity. So you can separate for infinitely and discover more, like there'll be more discovered. But ultimately, the act of separation is actually just the act of a focus on something and negation to every other potential thing. But ultimately, nothing actually is. Everything is finite in its actuality, meaning arises from your attention. It goes through existence, And then when your attention dissolves from it, this is why the old idea of the gods said, if no one believes in us, we cease to exist, we have no power. The same thing. It's like when you look at space, the bigger we create the telescopes into space, and we say, oh, we're now seeing something that's always been there. Or have we created something out of the infinite potentiality because we looked at it? So in other words, existence is created by the observer. Quantum physics tells us this. But the interesting thing is that ultimately there's no observer and there's nothing to be observed. This is where the Vedic teachings are. There's actually only the act of observation. So essentially the observer and the thing observed are actually not separate. They are joined by the act of observation. So the experience is the only thing that's ever happening. You are not separate ever from your experience. You are actually only ever the experience that you put your attention on is what you are, and you're nothing else. And that moment, that's what you are. And the next moment, that's what you are. And so there's not actually separation at all. There's just infinite potentiality, imagining its limitation, creating a focal point, and then relating from that with other focal points. But the actual relationship is what creation is, because that the you that feels it's separate from the other, there's only actually one. But by looking at yourself from two perspectives and then relating, you create what's called in geometry a vesica Pisces. So if you take two circles and you look at them and you go cross-eyed, you take one circle and you go cross-eyed or boss-eyed, it turns into two. And then it sort of they overlap. And then you get this middle thing, which is called a vesica Pisces, which is in the Chalice Well in Glastonbury. And it's like the first act of creation. And so essentially, it's only one circle, and the circle was an imaginary boundary. It's not real. But by looking at the circle from a perspective of separation, you create. So when you unalign your focus, when you split your focus, now, which is why we have two eyes. That's why we manifested this body to have two eyes. Now it looks like there's two things, and those two things relate, and that relationship wasn't in the circle. So the vesica Pisces is something created by the interaction of two circles, which means that through the interaction of each of us is the creation. So relationship is creation, and nothing else actually exists. You're not actually separate from anything you're relating to. There's only the relationship that's actually existing. I understand I've kind of gone into the deep end right now, and people's brains are sort of dissolving. But
it's a good read.
There's some really good,
yeah.
There's some really good books. I mean, the best book on this, which is, I'd say is a very thick read, is a book called I Am That by Sri Nisargadatta. And he was a guru in India who's passed, and basically people took his discourses, but he was an accountant that in the evening would sit and have people ask him questions. And essentially it's kind of like I think of it like a signpost on a cliff saying jump. So ultimately when you jump, when you live as one with source, none of this is, now you don't need the mind to figure all this out. It's an isness. There's no resistance, right? There's no resistance that's creating focus or limitation. However, from that place, you are inspired to create more limitation, more focus, because it's only in focus that we can experience, because the absence of separation leaves no possibility of experience. So that which, all that which it is, in wanting to experience the all that which it is, created the illusion of separation. So there's an infinite amount of us able to explore the interaction of the different perspectives of the all that is for eternity, and constantly feed back that experience in wisdom to birth new expansion. And that's the game of existence that's being played out through every one of us.
So much of great things, and really, I just love the depth of your knowledge and how much you have shared here today. It's just been an amazing awareness, epiphanies, and aha moments for me. So my last question I want to ask you: what's your message to the world?
Well, I mean, I would say I've downloaded a lot there, but ultimately I would say, my message to the world is the end of my first book, it's like, there are no mistakes, just misunderstandings. So I'd say that my message to myself and to the world is, don't be so hard on yourself. Don't like this ingratiation, this story of adding to yourself. As I said, I said this at the start, and I'll end with it. It's ultimately, when I'm talking to someone, it's ultimately normally what I say that brings tears to someone when they really realize it. It's that everything you added to yourself is less than what you came in with. You're not here to prove anything to yourself, to anybody else. You're not here to gain anything. You're not here to be more. You are more than enough. That's, that first thought and story that got told to you as a child, that you were too much, turn that around. Another way of saying that is that you're not enough. This modern spiritual idea where people say, I'm enough, I'm enough. If you're only enough, and I've only got enough sweets, and we're at school, and you want some of my sweets, and I've only got 4, I'll go, I've only got enough. What have you got? And you go, well, I've got some bonbons. And then I go, well, okay, well, we can trade. And so the enough mentality, this modern mentality of I'm enough, sets up this trade mentality of, well, what can I give you in return? Because if you've only got enough, like say you're full, they're full, then you'll need trade so you both can stay full. But if you're too much, which is what we all got told, which is what started this whole game of suppression, then what are you? You are more than enough. And so this is a huge difference, because if you're more than enough, then you have 2 choices. You suppress it, you cap it, you hold yourself back, which is what causes all your stress, and the whole game starts because of this, or you express it. And you discover you're more than enough, because the more you give, the more you get to give. It's inexhaustible. You are the source of it. You're the spring of it. It comes from within you. Then everybody in your life becomes, oh, how can I share to this? What can I bring to this? How can I give to this? And you recognize that the only way of seeing and knowing, everybody talks about the side, discover who you are, know who you are, be who you are. The only way of knowing who you are is to actually express who you are and do it authentically without agenda, because when you do that, it lands, and the eyes that are looking back at you see that part of you. You cannot see yourself, right? You cannot see here. If you're talking, you cannot see here. So, but when you're delivering truth, in other words, when you're delivering love expressed through you without condition, which is authenticity, like you have no agenda to it, the other feels at choice. Because if you have any agenda, the other feels that energy and they feel they're not at choice. And then they're like, and then they want to trade. Oh, I've got something to say back to you, and I've got to, or whatever. Or I don't want to hear that. I don't think that's true. They resist it. So you get this insistent resistance. But when you're just sharing from this place, when you're just becoming this channel, it lands, because the part of them that is no separate from you, the part of them that is actually your direct reflection, recognizes you, and you witness yourself in them witnessing you. And that's the only way to know who and what you are and discover it. And then what happens is the veils dissolve and the separation between you dissolves. And that's when quite often a hug or tears or connection really happens from this place of vulnerability. And so you are not enough. You are more than enough. And the only way this game makes sense is that you were given extra to share. Your job in every moment is to go, you're this unending spring. It's like, hey, I've got more than enough. Do you want some? Are you sure? Yeah, I've got more than enough. Please take them, because otherwise I have to hold back. And so where in your life are you holding back, sharing that which in the sharing makes you feel amazing? And go do that.
Thank you.
One last thing.
Yeah.
One last thing. The key, the secret of this is the thing that you've come to share, because every one of us has a different nuance on that, is the thing you judge yourself is the worst thing about you. The thing that you've spent your life hiding, the thing you've spent your life holding back or doing all these accolades or achieving all these things so nobody sees, that is actually the thing that you've come to share. So recognize the thing that you judge the worst thing about you, see where that is actually a benefit, something useful, and then whether it be a hobby or a job or a vocation, utilize that. So in my case, I'm a talker. So obviously as a kid, I was told, shut up, be quiet. No one wants to hear you. Stop, shut up. Now, if I stand on stage and I was like, oh, I can't say anything, and people are like, well, no, hang on. We want you to please talk and talk loud and get out of your way and have an opinion and project your voice. So the thing that I spent my life trying to hide and hold back and hiding behind being a DJ and these other things where it is actually now the thing that fulfills me the most.
Thank you. I'm a huge believer of doing what you love, and I think you said it really beautifully. So thank you so much, Paul, for today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I think this is the longest session I ever had, and so much of nuggets. It's even like a masterclass on its own. So thank you so much for your time and experience and knowledge. I appreciate it.
Well, I think, hey, you said it 3 times, so who am I to get in the way of this? Perhaps we should collaborate, take this, perhaps you can take this, edit it down, and perhaps we can present this as a masterclass,
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, sweetheart.
Thank you for joining us on this soul-enriching episode of Spatial Sarah, the podcast that brings back the beauty of meaningful conversations. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I invite you to carry the inspiration from these campfire-worthy conversations into your daily life. Embrace the power of connection, open your mind to new ideas, and continue exploring the depths of our own thoughts. Share this episode with someone you know will benefit. Follow and tag me on Instagram at @IamSarahSammy, #CampfireWorthyConvo. Until next episode, keep dreaming, keep connecting, and keep embracing the magic of meaningful conversations. Signing off, your spatial buddy, Sarah.